Welcome, welcome. Welcome to Leader Sight, where we will attempt today, as I have done 8 other times up until now, to provide you with some insight, some foresight, and yes, some 2020 hindsight about leadership. This is going to be a unique hour together. This will be a little bit different from the previous meetings that I had, which had much more of a complete focus on business leadership and the art of leading teams and leading companies. This is certainly not going to be a discussion that's unrelated to those topics, but it's going to be more about an inner journey, a spiritual journey. My guest, Ernie Pomerleau, is well known to many of you. Some of you don't know him so well. I'll introduce him more in a minute. For Ernie, the journey into spirituality, into intuition, came through loss, through death. And in my conversations with Ernie over the last 5 years, this has been a theme that we've touched on many times, and that many times I thought, boy, I'd really like other people to have the opportunity to hear this. And so I'm really pleased and grateful to you, Ernie. Welcome.
Thank you.
For being willing to share, some of the most personal and important lessons that you've gotten from your journey. And for those of you who missed it, I know some of you heard, we did a previous interview on a different topic on succession and Ernie's fascinating journey to overcome a big challenge on his succession journey in the company Pomerleau Real Estate that he has really driven for decades now with his dad. So if you missed that one, it was special, and it's available, as all of these interviews are, on YouTube, which you can access through my website. So Ernie, you up for this? What have you gotten yourself into?
I have no idea.
I'm going to introduce Ernie with a few slides. And by the way, this is our agenda. We'll talk for about half an hour. I'll just let you listen to us talk. And then I think this will stimulate a lot of thinking for you, and we'll give you a chance to put some of that into words in breakout rooms for 10 minutes and then come back and let you interact with Ernie and ask Ernie questions. So Ernie Pomerleau is the oldest son in this picture, the guy in the tie who's kneeling with the pup. And dogs might come into the story again when we end, with his dad up there above him and his large amount of sisters and one brother in this family picture that was taken a while ago. And so Ernie and his dad ran Pomerleau Real Estate for a long time until his dad's passing some years ago. It's one of the largest real estate companies in Vermont, if not the largest. Here's a picture of Tony Pomerleau, well-known member of this community here in northern Vermont, in the state of Vermont, who passed away a few years ago at the age of 100, and Ernie, who's been on the journey, that business journey, for a long time. And just to give you a little taste of the wonderful contributions this family has made to our community. Here's a picture of our brand new YMCA in Burlington, Vermont that has the Pomerleau family name on it. Ernie's been an advisor to many governors, many mayors, many business owners, many nonprofit leaders, Boys and Girls Club. Countless people have come to Ernie for his wisdom and help succeeding. So Ernie told me early on that two of his sisters died young. So Ellen and Ann, is that right?
Yeah, Anne Marie.
How old were you, Ernie, when your first sister passed away?
Do that again?
How old were you when when was it Ellen or Ann who died first?
Ellen passed away first.
How old were you?
40.
Yeah. And so, you've told me many times that those passings were big events for you.
Yeah, without question.
So take me into that a little.
Sure. But before I do that, I just wanted to preface with everybody, this is not a religious diatribe. I'm an ENFP on Myers-Briggs. E is like off the charts intuition. So I run my business intuitively and I work around the edges. This kind of all started when I got involved with Eric years and years ago in an attempt to realize that, the Bowen system probably could benefit me a little bit. It's a family system. It was something that I realized that, as you saw a picture of 10 kids, having that many shareholders could get a little complicated when the relationship with Dad and I was a little challenged. And as it turned out, I was looking to Eric to fix all my problems because it really wasn't about me. It was about somebody else. But we found out it was about me. And once we got that figured out with what my triggers were and what my, my non-differentiation elements were, we actually worked through. And I would tell you with one more preface, then I'll get into the answer. I attended years ago with a friend, a thing on cancer wellness, and it was Deepak Chopra. And he started off and he goes, he said, I know you're all here for me to teach you. He said, but nothing could be further from the truth. And his statement was as follows. He said, you already know everything you need to know. I'm here just to help you remember. If it strikes you as your truth, it is. And if it doesn't, it's not. So with that premise, that's the journey. So when I was working with Eric through a lot of this, it became kind of an interesting storyline dealing with my father and, underlying contracts, call them what you will, spiritual contracts, social contracts, father-son contracts. But it took me on a journey that was pretty revealing. And he asked me to kind of go into it a little bit, and I will for what it's worth for each one of you. It'll have different impacts, and to others it won't have any impacts. And my intention is not to give you be a prophet to anybody. This is simply a personal journey.
Yeah, you've had a very unique relationship with death, intuition, and spirituality, right?
Yep.
It's been very much part of how you led the business. Yep. And the story about your dad, we've got that recorded on a different conversation, but I think we agree the focus today would be more on that aspect of it, right?
Yeah. So
when your sister passed away, that led to, I know, a long journey that I want to touch on a little bit at some point about your role in bringing hospice and making hospice stronger here in Vermont. But how would you start it, with this passing of your sister, and what did that open? Did I say it right when I said the door into intuition, spirituality was through death for
sure.
you?
Well, as we know, a lot of adversities opens, or the mother of invention kind of a thing. But clearly in my life, the passing of several people that were really important to me opened a doorway that I didn't expect, wasn't ready for. When my sister Ellen died at 23, I was holding her, and I'd done a lot of work with them. Everybody in the family had their own little jobs to do, but I'll try to cut to the chase and where this changed. So My expectation of one of my first sister's death was one of travesty and fear and sadness and you name it, all of the adjectives that you would associate with death. And I'm holding my sister's hand, and I felt euphoria. I felt a passing that was anything but sad at the moment. It was sad later on, but at the moment it was like I'm experiencing a number of emotions that are the antithesis of what my expectations would be under this environment. And I had not done hospice work, and I hadn't been with somebody who was passing.
It surprised you.
Yeah, it surprised me and
You're
defined.
literally holding her hand at the moment her heart stops and her breathing stops. Is that
Yep.
what you're saying?
And I clearly knew what had transpired,
Yeah.
and I had to tell the family around me what had transpired. And I knew what had happened. The doctor came in and confirmed that. So anyway, moving forward on what Eric was alluding to, so I found myself in this unique environment all of a sudden of having this kind of spiritual awakening, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of words for
Would you call that a spiritual awakening?
it. I would.
And can I just slow you down for one sec here? So you're holding her hand, and as you recall, it was like the euphoria. Did it like come over you at that moment?
Oh, it swept through me. Yeah, no,
It was like
I
it
think.
wasn't there before, but it was.
Oh, no. It wasn't just an imaginative thing. It was an experiential thing of beauty and love and serenity and
Yeah.
euphoria, where you would expect to have, this unbelievable loss and this sadness. And so I later was able to reassemble it, and have experienced that many times since. But I then realized that something transformational had happened, and it led me almost immediately to getting calls from people who were passing, and to sit with them for endless hours answering questions that I have no idea where I got the answers, but they came, and then people left comfortably. Literally a week later, somebody called me and said, "We're doing this respite house in Williston. We've heard your story. We want you to be a part of it." Well, as this conversation is going on, I'm making 100 reasons in my head or excuses why I couldn't possibly get involved with that.
Too busy.
Too busy. And at the end, I said, "Yeah, sure." And then I became one of the original people on the board of the Williston Respite House. And I would tell you that the experiential quality of that, and after by the way, this is just an aside, at the passing of my sister Ellen, the fear of death just never ever entered my soul again. It just was gone. It was absolutely gone. I know that sounds perhaps trite, but that's my reality.
Well, probably.
And I'm 30 odd years out, and I've never had that cross my ship as any fear of anything. When it's time to go, I'll go. Shortly thereafter, well, not shortly, that was almost 10 years. Ellen, Anne-Marie had passed, and that whole journey of each one, I could tell you specifically what they meant in my life and what lessons I learned from them. Clearly, Ellen had given me an insight to do this work that I needed to do. And I did it, and I followed it, and I couldn't imagine not doing it. And if you read, well, of course I would, the Book of the Dead it's a ancient Buddhist book. And you start off, everybody that studies to become a Lama and a priest in the Buddhist tradition are told that they have to go to work with people who are dying for 6 months, with the understanding that they feel very strongly that you cannot understand life if you do not understand death. In that respite house, many of the nurses were older that I met, and we shared this thing because I said, I experienced something at the death of my sister that was analogous to the birth feeling of my daughter when she was born. And I said, that's like really strange. And they said, no, it's not. Half of our nurses here are ex-OBGYN nurses that have moved from the hospital to the respite house simply because they're experiencing the joy of birth on one end and they're experiencing the joy of birth on the other side. It has a little bit more emotional attachment to it going out, but they perceive it as a birth, and they wanted to spend their final years in work working with people who had seen that, felt that. I spent some time with nurses even at the Dana-Farber late at night, and I said, boy, this must be really hard work. And they said, you don't understand, it's a gift. At 2 o'clock in the morning, we're the only ones here. And people who are dying are not talking about whether the Red Sox won or whether it's raining outside. They're talking from their soul and their experiences, and it's an honor and a gift. And so I'm in that framework, kind of cross the Rubicon, as it were, working my business, but working it with this area that I had part of my life that needed to research and explore and find this thing that had kind of laid itself on my pathway. My sister Annie became a quadriplegic. She had a brain tumor. And I would tell you that that to me was the ultimate human nightmare. Matter of fact, what I did learn is that I don't have them anymore, but when I used to have bad days, I used to check my watch, lay down and say, okay, muckhead, you got 3 minutes. You can't move, you can't scratch your nose, you can't get up, you can't walk, you can't do anything. 3 minutes feels like 3 hours. After that, you go, okay, so how you doing now? Pretty good? Okay, so let's go on. Annie lived as a quadriplegic for 5 years. I will share one story with you, which to me is profound, maybe for you as well. But it gave me some really good insights about life's lessons. And I walked in one day, and as I did every day, and my dog wrapped up around her. And she would act, if you talked with her, you wouldn't know she was a quadriplegic. She'd sit up in bed and she'd engage you and you wouldn't have to engage her. But she said, Ernie, come in, shut the door. I got to tell you a story. She said, I had an NDE, a near-death experience last night. And she said, before I tell it to you, she said, be aware that, I'm aware that it could have been a dream, could have been my own subconscious. But she said, it felt like it really happened. I think it did. And so I'm going to tell you in the first person. But it doesn't matter. The lesson is the same. So she went, last night, this beautiful apparition came over my bed. It was glowing in gold and purple, and it was just the softest thing. And it was kind of talking to me in vibrations and impulses. And she said, here, I've been in this wheelchair for 5 years, wanting to get up and walk. And this apparition looked at me and said, Annie, I'm here to offer you your fondest desire. I can get you up and have you walking and feeling all of your limbs. And then she said, but in trade for that, you will have to lose all the knowledge that you garnered with this disease. And she looked at me in tears and she said, do you know what I did? I said, no. She said, Ernie, I paused. The gift was in the pause. I realized that I was not the same person. Because of this disease, I was not the same person that I was 5 years ago, spiritually, philosophically, psychologically, or physically, of course. But she said, I realized I didn't want to be that person. And that this stillness had given me a chance to explore things I would have never explored, and changes in me that I would have never found without this. Now, remember, this is the ultimate human nightmare. And, I went and I said, Annie, thanks. I said, if you can find purpose in what I think is beyond any horrific occurrence in a human's life, then I have no excuse to find any excuse of anything that happens in my life that doesn't seem to be proper.
Yeah.
And so the next day, she went into a coma.
Wow.
She was ready to move on. She had learned her life's lesson. And when everybody in the family's energy had lessened, she moved on. So I've had continuous, inroads. My friend Tom Menson, who was executive VP of, what?
Excuse me for 1 second, just interesting, in both the passings, this thing kind of came to you. It happened to you. You weren't going looking for it.
No.
It just came to you. And if you don't mind, I want to hear about your friend Tom and your, maybe we'll get to your team of advisors, Ernie.
Oh, yeah.
Is all of
He's
this,
one of them, yes.
we've talked many times, and we'll share some today about how these experiences have changed how you've led your business. But I wanted to ask you, just to take it one question here, that how do you understand this event that occurred with your sister Ellen, where you were holding her hand and this wave came over you of joy? What was that? How do you think about that? I know you, maybe none of us know exactly, but how do you think about it?
So there's an old saying, the standard statement, you will believe it when you see it. I have another statement that I think makes a lot more sense. You will see it when you believe it. So it's about changing your belief patterns. It's about being open. I was fairly skeptical, sub 40. And then I decided I'd open up my scope a little bit. And as things came in, it would be like living in going to a cafeteria. Try everything that's in it. And if it doesn't taste good, don't eat it. But try it, because you won't know till you try it. So that what happened was I had no preconceived notion. I was helping my sister. I spent years working with her. Every person in the family had, some task. They were a caregiver, they were the comedian, they were something. Everybody had a task. She and I spent a lot of time talking, searching about spirituality. What I will tell you, as I'm sure everybody on this screen has experienced, as people that we know come close to transition, there's a very dramatic change in priorities and perspective. One doesn't, all of a sudden, one finds a different level. Religion is found in a book. Spirituality is found in passing. And it's a different animal, because all of a sudden, everything that you've taken on faith, you have to feel, you have to experience, you have to yearn about, you have to fear about, you have to think about, and all of a sudden it's something that's not in a book or being told to you by some other person. It's your own personal experience. And so I traveled that journey with Ellen, for sure.
Yeah.
And then we spent a lot of time. What would this be like? And I don't think it was any accident that she and I had some spiritual contract that she would be my gift to open this portal for me and send me down this road of exploration. But she was clearly by far the first person. I mean, I think I've told you this, Eric. Ellen's greatest fear that she would be forgotten. She was 23 years old. I was literally home, after her funeral for a few hours, and a friend called me and said, this gentleman that I knew, his wife was dying, and she was in fear, and would I go and talk with her? And I did. And as I told you earlier, I spent several hours with her, and she asked me questions, and I was getting answers just like that. And I left that, and I went, I don't know. I think I know where those answers came from, because they sure as hell didn't come from me. And I said, Ellen, maybe you will not be forgotten, because you will live through these things. And this woman, the very next day, called her family in and said it was time for her to go. And so I've seen that so many times.
This idea of a team of advisors that you've said this, that you feel you have information or knowledge that comes to you from some of these departed loved ones. Is that right?
Yeah, without question.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, let me give you, I mean, I could give you 1,000, but we'd have to be on here for hours. The I get these wonderful, again, you will see it when you believe it, right? This has happened so many times. I find it humorous. I'll go to Ellen because that's where we started. So dragonflies started to show up. One of my sisters asked for signs, and dragonflies just started to show up like crazy. And I could go on for hours about dragonflies, but I'll give you one story. So Ellen died of leukemia. And so I co-chaired the first leukemia walk in Burlington. And as I was giving my little talk before, hundreds and hundreds of people with balloons walking the street at night, and I held one, a gold one with Ellen's name on it. But I said about the story that we were all here sharing something, and I told a story about my sister Ellen. I remember my sister Ellen was worried about not being remembered.
Yeah.
So here this whole format was based on Ellen. So I had to leave. There was something going on at the end of the thing. I just said, look, there's this raffle. There's a whole bunch of things going on. I said, if I win anything or do it, so just give them away. Or sell them, do whatever. I've got to run. Anyway, the lady that was in charge of it shows up Monday morning. And coincidentally, I had a 9 o'clock canceled. And I got a call from downstairs and she said, Gail's here. She'd like to spend 1 minute with you. She's got something for you. So I came down. She said, look, I kept this one thing. It's all wrapped up, but it's an excuse to come in to say, thank you. Here's how much we raised. It was an amazing first event. And so I took it away. And I came up to my office right here and I opened it up. So now remember about the dragonflies. Now, they had gone on for years, right? And so I open it up. It's a box that says the Dragonfly Gift Shop of Stowe. Didn't even know they had one. Inside was a magnificent candle with an embossed dragonfly.
And now you got to fill this in. Now, how did this dragonfly, this was associated with your sister?
Yeah. So,
how did that?
Well, it's Grace. Grace was a believer and just said, Ellen, we need a sign from you. So signs started to show up. Every time we needed something, wanted something, a dragonfly showed up. And then the next thing I know, when Anne Marie died, on Grace's heart, 2 dragonflies. You know how they fly connected when they're landed on her heart. Now, come on, give me a break. And there's hundreds of those stories. So with me, it just became a function of seeing this all the time. I mean, I just time after time after time after time. If it happened once, you'd say it a coincidence. It happened 3-4 times. You'd say that's pretty cool, but so what? Happens 100 times, and in ways that make no sense. How would a woman that I said, don't bring me anything, bring me a box, that knew nothing about dragonflies, didn't know what was in it, and my sister dies of leukemia. I'm running talking about her, and I get a thank you on Monday. Let's just let you know I heard your story. Now, you can believe that or not. I happen to believe it, and that's the way I live.
What's interesting to me is there's an ancient literature. I'm familiar with ancient literature from India that talks about this sort of thing, that somehow nature can be, there's a relationship between nature and such things as your sister's spirit. And I know that for you, it's something you have a relationship. You seem to have a relationship with this kind of process. And as the conversation goes on, we'll probably get, before it ends, maybe after a breakout, to talking a little bit about the passing of your daughter last year, and how the same thing has happened for you with owls, as you're describing here with the dragonflies. So you've said this team of advisors that you feel you have access to wisdom that has something to do with these relationships that you have with departed loved ones.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, without sounding too
do you sort of seek it out? Do you kind of,
You know, with the experience that I've had with my sisters, with my father, with friends that have passed, with all the signs, you know, so watch, Joseph Campbell once set up, you know, he said, you know, everything is like a metaphor. He said, and I love this. He said, if you're Catholic, you believe in angels. If you're Buddhist, you believe in guides. Tell me the difference, right? If you believe in purgatory and things don't go right and you got to fix yourself, or you believe in reincarnation, they're metaphors. And so I don't get hung up on a lot of words. I go with feelings. And so, you know, Tom, one of my friends, I told you, was, you know, had been a really instrumental piece in transition when he lived with me for 6 months with his wife and child, going through pancreatic cancer. And one of his last major lessons to me, and then I'll go into exactly your question. I'm at the respite house, and he said, "You got to come in. I had like my sister had, a near-death experience." And he said, "Get this." He said, "This is amazing." He said, I'll do it really fast. He said, "I crossed over." He said, "It was really beautiful." But he said, "What I realized is nobody judges you. You judge yourself." He said, "I saw people angels experiencing demons, but they were their own. I saw people going into nirvana. It's what they brought with him." And he said, "Remember, there's only one thing you need to remember." He said, "God is love." And he looks at me and he says, "And she's really pretty." And so I laughed, and then he went on with a bunch of stories, which I will not belabor, but he said, "Here's the bottom line. Here's what I was there to learn, and here's my lesson I want to pass on to you." And I have held this one for 28 years, and it means as much to me today as it did then. He said, here's what I learned in my passage. Remember to pack in your bags only that which you want to take with you, because you leave nothing behind. If you pack only love, you will not know you died. So he's one of my, I would say, guides, intermediaries. We've all lost a lot of friends. I'm sure everybody on this screen at one time or another has felt the presence, a thought, a memory, but stronger than just a normal memory, a connectivity. You either believe it's connected or you don't. That's a choice we all make. I would tell you that the more connections I feel, the more I believe them. And I have a day hasn't passed that I haven't spoken to Ellen and Annie, and now my daughter. And I've got a bunch of friends that, you know, are in the same boat. So
let's just stay with this for a few minutes, and we'll just wait till the breakout time is right here. We've got about half an hour left. So it's touching to see your emotion, Ernie. And, you know, let's bring in this chapter that after all this journey you've had with death and hospice, and this seems to be a kind of relationship established in you between that which is invisible, but which is very tangible for you. You had another chapter of the journey that you never were prepared for, which is that Ernie's only daughter developed cancer and passed away after a really difficult journey last year. Yeah. So you just mentioned that you feel a sense of connection with her. Is that growing?
yeah, I got to tell you, it is hard. It's without question my ultimate lesson. Losing friends, losing siblings is one thing. Losing your flesh and blood there are no words. Grief and love become a single emotion, and you spend a lot of time trying to detangle. The pain will never go away, but you want the love to stand on its own. In the beginning, it can't. She had 13 cousins they've all had 13 written on their, it's tattooed on their wrists. They are intricately tied. They're amazing. They were with her for 4 days before she passed. She went out on a, it was really beautiful. She was on the gurney. They dressed her in white hat, white shoes, white garb. And as she went out, they all put red roses on her and a note. And when she was put into the van, they waited on the street and down the street. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because over the van, 2 dragonflies hovered. Now, tell me that's coincidence. A quick story to show you how this is all tied together. I lost a brother-in-law last week who was very close to Jesse. And the owls that you were talking about that have become symbolic of Jesse in transition. I have one in my pocket. I have one, oh, on the back of my phone. Jessica's dog, Willard, was out with her husband, and he was being videoed. The dog looks up. There's a big white owl, snow owl, in the tree, and it flies away. He sent it to my niece, Catherine. At exactly the same time, her father passed. And she had always said Jess was there waiting for him. She just sent me literally last night a note that said, I'll try to fast forward this. A friend of mine in California wanted to honor Dad and Jessica because she knew how close I was. She wrote to somebody in Burlington, didn't even know they had a tree giving protocol, but they did. And they have, Jesse's urn has the tree of life. The note came back, there's a tree of life on it and said, till we meet again. The first tree was for Dan Corkery. Nobody in Burlington knew who Dan Corkery was. The next two spots that were available for a tree in April was 69 College Street. That's Pomerleau real estate. The second one was across the street that Jessica's tree will be placed at is 40 College Street, where her condo was for 40 years and all the cousins had parties. What are the chances of that? 1,000,000 to 1 maybe? A woman that chose Burlington, didn't know where College Street was, never visited Burlington, told her name, but the first thing she said was for Dan Corkery, and the person doing this didn't know anybody by the name of Corkery. So how does that happen? I won't belabor 100 other stories like that, but
Yeah.
so I am trying to, if I'm on this path to learn about transition, I have just come across the toughest, hardest, meanest, nastiest, awful lesson I will ever learn in this life. And I better well put my big boy pants on and try to figure this out, because it's really hard. And I don't pretend to know the meaning of that one yet, but I will.
So maybe that's the note that we pause and give people a little breakout experience here. And we can come back to that. And I know you have some powerful lessons to share about how that's, that what you just talked about, the challenge and what you've been learning from it. So here's some questions just to consider. I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk together about what you've heard. It's real simple. What has today's discussion got you thinking about, and what actions does it inspire you to consider? And for the breakout, just a suggestion that you just kind of jump past the introductions. If one of you, it'll be groups of 3, just starts off saying, well, here's what it's got me thinking about. Say what you think, listen to what they think, practice curiosity. Somebody talks for a couple minutes and then stops, and somebody else can pick up. So just give me a moment here while I allow Zoom to do its thing and create these breakout rooms for you. And I'll set this for about 7 minutes, about 7 minutes to just interact and talk about what these stories have generated in you. And then we'll see you back here.
As always, Eric, we needed another 2 hours for that conversation.
Eric, you're muted.
Mitch, what would have happened if you had another 10 minutes? Where was it headed?
We're talking about, we're in conversations with depth and layer in the context of relationship with a guy who I've never met, but is 10 miles from me right now and 6 miles from where I live. And we would have brought it a little deeper.
Thank you, Mitch. Somebody, Ernie's old friend Suzanne Brew was in the breakout room I was in, and she said Ernie really lives kind of on both sides. And I have a quote here from a letter that someone wrote to Ernie after the passing of Jessica. She does not cease to exist. If you have a glass of water and the glass breaks, the water does not cease to exist. It's just no longer found in that glass. So you were saying, Ernie, I just want to ask you one thing and then let some people ask you questions. You were saying this thing about how in the early phases after Jessica's passing, which we've talked before about, there's a Shakespearean quality to this passing. It happened right after she was married. Yep. and before she could conceive a grandchild. And you said, I don't know who the author of this story is, but that person is an asshole.
Pretty much.
And you said that you were talking about this point about how the love is painful, but that has evolved for you. Can you say a little about that?
So there's two parts to that, two statements that I've heard that I've kind of, when we get into some kind of adversity, you'll always hear something that resonates for you for whatever reason. Two of them is that, grief is the price of love. The more love, the more grief. So you kind of hold on to both ends of that. But then the trick is that somebody said, when I lost my child, I had love and grief, love and pain intertwined so much that I couldn't differentiate. They became an awful, horrible emotion because I couldn't look at a picture without feeling pain. And then I think about the pain would overwhelm the love, and yet I'd strive to find love, and I couldn't, the memories wouldn't come without pain. And they said, over time, what you do is you learn to detangle, and the pain will never go away. You don't want it to go away, but you want it to reside not as PTSD in a reptilian mind. You want it to, you can view it and see it, and you can have a loss and miss, but you really want to get into a separate compartment where your experience of love, I mean, it was funny, Paula in our chat room said when her father passed, he said it was all about love. I mean, we hear that again and again and again, and I would tell you, it's all about love. And I don't care what topic you have, that's the bottom common denominator. So my journey is to separate this pain and to find love so that I can understand, I can look at her picture for more than a few seconds and be able to travel back into the beautiful memories. And I wouldn't give up one day of 36 years to eliminate this pain. It was an amazing journey, one that very few people experience. The loss sucks.
Yeah. I want to ask you, and then I would invite somebody else to ask you what's your understanding, Ernie, of why this is happening to you? You make meaning of these sorts of things. What are you currently thinking about?
I have a firm belief, a spiritual belief. I have to. I mean, I can sit there and, go into deep depression, and I can sit with my head in the sand and I can wait for the world to pass. I can do that. That's certainly a choice. But if I've had the experiences with my sisters, with my father, with cousins, with 5 very close, deep friends, and many others, and I've been in respite house. My sign in my 8th house in astrology is the house of death. So I obviously have chosen this life for some reason that I don't quite understand yet. Why my daughter and I chose a contract to experience this, I don't know, but I have work to do and I can choose not to do it. But that doesn't sound like a very good option. I learned from my 2 sisters a way to open up the breach in a way that opened up the world to me in a different way, changed my perspective of business, changed my priorities, changed my concerns, changed the relevancy of what was important. So I have the mother load. I have the sacred chalice of lessons here. And I have had so many signs that I've just got to hunker down and do the work. And as I say, learn to let go and to learn to embrace and to find out what I told you all a story about Annie, and a lesson that shocked me, but makes perfect sense. And I have to find in my life what the loss of my daughter means in this path to her. She taught something to 13 nieces and nephews. I didn't realize that she was the center cog of keeping them all together. And they went through literally a transformational process that is overwhelming and will be processed out. Dee and I did, clearly. Friends of hers did. I would tell you right now, there are legacies of funds for animals and scholarships and stuff coming out of the woodwork that we will work as a legacy to her that otherwise might not have happened. And so I have a book where the last chapter was ripped out. I have to rewrite that chapter. I have writer's block right now.
So we have a couple minutes for some of you, maybe 2, 1 question, 1 comment. If anybody would like to ask Ernie a question or make a comment, here's a picture of his daughter. And this picture is a neat picture. She owned a store, and this is a image of her that was put in the store over Christmas after her passing. And these dogs were for sale, and anybody could buy one and give it to somebody who was a disadvantaged person struggling in an organization here. And
that raised $12,000 for Rescue Me.
Yeah.
And for rescue dogs. This dog right here, Willard, is her dog, and he was a St. Croix Island dog. And out of this came another example of how magic happens. Steps for domestic violence. One of the people working in this store wanted to have a bunch of these elements to give to children. So I called the director of Steps and I said, we've got a bunch of stuffed animals I'd love to give to your children. How many do you have in custody? She said 90. I said, excuse me, do you mean a 9 with a 0 in back of it? And I said, okay, we've got some work to do. So we did 90 phenomenal gift packages. We raised $25,000. We went in, and on the bag was believe, right? Because that was Jesse's thing at Christmas, you have to believe. So we went into this secret place where people could then come that were suffering abuse in their family and with their children. And so we left it, and somebody started to cry. I said, what's going on? She said, we didn't know what we were going to do. And she turned to the other woman that was there and she said, what do we do? And the other woman said, we just have to believe.
So I saw Manthan Gandhi, you have your hand up. You want to make a comment?
Yeah, Arnie, thanks for sharing your stories with us on your experiences. I was curious to know, how did you've made meaning out of the loss of your daughter, and losing a child is something no parent should ever have to go through. How, how did how did your wife experience this, and like what role or
They were,
what part did you have to play in
as
that?
Suzanne can attest, they shared a soul. So there are no adjectives to talk to what the feelings were and the pain, but we together are attempting, as I said, to create a legacy. Jessica had two beautiful stores, women boutique shops. Jesse is running them and making them continue in the legacy of our daughter. She's the buyer, she's designer. We've got great managers. It sucks through COVID, to say the least, but we're going to keep them alive and moving them forward. So that's helped her get that. She was so busy doing 90 gift packages for the steps for, to stop, domestic abuse. We're finding ways to live in Jessica's legacy. It's hard to look at every morning we light candles in front of her picture, and a dog that we got named after what Jessie loves called Nugget. We got another dog because every little dog she would call Nugget, so we wanted to get a Nugget. Every time we light the candles, it barks. It doesn't bark any other time. So what's that connection? I could tell you 100 things, but anyway, so I don't really have a good answer. It's probably as hard as it is for a father. I'm not a woman, I haven't given birth, but I would tell you, I know it's harder. And they shared a soul, and it's a long journey, but we're working hard, Manthan, to get an answer and to move forward without crumbling.
Ernie, I want to thank you again so much for coming and being so open and sharing this journey. I want to end on this story here. It's going to take just a minute, but right before I do that, I just want to note again that there's some more events coming up here in a few weeks here. One of the people I interviewed, Jonathan Rubright from the National Board of Medical Examiner, told me he wanted to interview me, and I said, yes, okay, so we're going to do that in a few weeks. And then a few weeks after that, Adam Bunting, who's a special leader in our community, has created amazing culture at a public high school here. We'll talk about how to develop culture. And but just to close, Ernie, this is a perfect place to close.
Oh yeah.
Tell us about this and then we'll be done.
Quick story. So this is another sign. So I'm having a meeting at the store with the managers and with Dee and a facilitator. And two stories. Remember, I told you, I'll get to that. So Jessica left on what is called Lion's Gate. In an astrology chart, it's the strongest time to move your spirit forward. Lion's Gate. So I'm sitting there looking and talking about the next steps in this company that she had developed so beautifully. This picture of the lion is sitting in the room we're having this meeting after I had just learned she left on Lion's Gate. She painted that in college and it's sitting there, the lion. Next to it, I even forgot about this. Do you remember the words believe? So I'm going to read that to you. B-E-L-I-E-V. Believe, and then in the things you cannot see. I will leave you with that. That was from Jessica to me. So I believe in the things I cannot see because my daughter told me to.
All right, Ernie, thank you so much. Thank you for being here, and onward ho. Thank you so much, Ernie. Bye. Bye.